Most small farmers like you buy their feed. Every week, every month, every season. Bags in, money out. And most of them have accepted that this is just the cost of keeping animals. But here's what most of them don't know. The land they're already standing on, 1 acre or even less, can produce up to 80% of everything their animals need to eat. Not someday, not with a massive budget. Right now, with the right system in the right place. The problem isn't land. The problem is how it's being used. Welcome back to Small Purposeful Farming. Today we are going deep. This is one of the most complete frameworks we've ever put together on this channel. We're going to walk through a full 1 acre feed-independent system broken into 6 distinct zones. Each zone produces something your animals need. Each zone feeds the others, and together they form a system that can dramatically reduce, and in many cases nearly eliminate, your dependence on purchased feed. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how these zones work, how they connect, and how you can begin building this on your own property, wherever you're starting from. Here are the 6 zones we're covering today. Zone 1, the protein zone. Zone 2, the forage zone. Zone 3, the grain zone. Zone 4, the poultry integration zone. Zone 5, the compost and worm zone. Zone 6, the water production zone. Every zone has a job. Every zone connects. And when they work together, you stop buying feed and start producing it. Before we walk through the zones, let's address the number. 80%, because it deserves a real answer. Is that realistic? Yes. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations has studied integrated small farm systems for decades. Systems that combine aquatic plants, perennial fodder, insect production, and on-farm grain. In their published documentation of small-scale livestock integration, on-farm feed coverage consistently reaches between 70 and 90% depending on the animal mix, climate, and management approach. Here is what makes this possible. Most of the highest protein, fastest growing feed plants in the world are not sold in any feed store. They're grown in backyard ponds, simple raised beds, and small managed water bodies. And most American producers have never heard of them. What you're about to learn is not new. These systems have been used by small producers across Southeast Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Latin America for generations. The reason most small farmers don't do this isn't because it doesn't work. It's because no one laid it out in one place. Until today. Let's start. Zone 1 is the protein zone, and it may be the most powerful section of this entire system. This zone has one job: produce high-protein feed as fast as possible, using as little space as possible. 3 organisms carry this zone: duckweed, azolla, and black soldier fly larvae. Let's start with duckweed. Duckweed is the fastest growing plant on Earth. Under ideal conditions, it doubles its mass every 16 to 48 hours, and it contains between 20 and 45% crude protein by dry weight, a figure that is directly comparable to soybean meal, which is the primary protein ingredient in most commercial poultry feed on the market today. Duckweed fed fresh to poultry and waterfowl can meaningfully improve growth rates and directly replace a significant portion of commercial protein supplement in managed small flock rations. A single 100 square foot shallow pond, something the size of a large garden bed, can produce enough duckweed to supplement the protein needs of a small laying flock on a continuous, year-round basis, as long as it receives nutrients and adequate warmth. You are looking at a floating plant that replicates in days. That costs nothing to grow once it's established. That produces protein at the level of the primary ingredient inside every bag of feed you have ever purchased. That should stop you in your tracks. Now, azolla. Azolla is a floating water fern that lives in a symbiotic relationship with a nitrogen-fixing cyanobacterium called Anabaena azollae. That cyanobacterium pulls nitrogen directly from the atmosphere. What this means in practice is that azolla fertilizes itself, and when you harvest it and add it to compost or feed it fresh, it simultaneously fertilizes your soil and feeds your animals. The FAO has documented extensive use of azolla across Asian smallholder farming as both an animal feed supplement and a green fertilizer applied to rice paddies. Its protein content ranges from 19 to 30% by dry weight, and it grows in the same water body as your duckweed with minimal added management. There's already a dedicated video on duckweed and azolla. I'll link it in the description. 2 crops, 1 pond, both producing, and then there are black soldier fly larvae. This is the one that makes some people pause. But stay with me, because what these larvae do is genuinely remarkable. Black soldier fly larvae, commonly called BSFL, convert organic waste into high-protein animal feed at an efficiency that no grain or plant can match. Research has documented BSFL at between 40 and 44% crude protein on a dry matter basis, along with significant fat content, making them a complete protein and energy source suitable for poultry, fish, and even small pigs. A simple bin system, roughly 4 to 8 square feet, fed on kitchen scraps, garden waste, and animal manure, can produce enough larvae to meaningfully supplement a small flock's diet several times per week. There's already a dedicated video on BSFL. I'll link it in the description. And now here is what makes the protein zone something exceptional. These 3 systems feed each other. Your animals eat duckweed and azolla. Their waste goes into the BSFL bin. The BSFL produce frass, a nutrient-dense byproduct, which fertilizes your duckweed pond. The duckweed grows faster, the larvae grow. The cycle continues. That is a closed biological loop, running inside a single zone. Zone 2 is the forage zone, the living green infrastructure of your feed system. Where the protein zone works in water and bins, the forage zone works in soil. This zone grows perennial plants that come back year after year without replanting, that produce large volumes of leafy material rich in protein, minerals, and vitamins. 3 plants carry this zone: moringa, mulberry, and comfrey. Moringa oleifera is one of the most thoroughly documented multi-purpose feed plants in agricultural science. Its leaves contain approximately 27% crude protein on a dry weight basis, alongside high concentrations of calcium, iron, and vitamins A, C, and E. Moringa leaf meal can replace a significant portion of conventional protein supplement in poultry and small ruminant rations without measurable negative impact on production performance. Moringa grows fast in warm climates, tolerates poor soil, and regrows aggressively after cutting. It can be coppiced, cut back hard to near ground level, multiple times per year to produce a continuous harvest of young leafy growth. On 1 acre, even a modest planting of 50 to 100 moringa trees can yield significant tonnage of harvestable leaf material annually. There's also a dedicated video on moringa. I'll link it in the description. Now here's something most people do not expect to see on a serious feed production plan. Mulberry trees, Morus alba, the white mulberry in particular, are one of the best dual-purpose fodder trees available to small American producers, and they are significantly underused. The leaves contain between 15 and 23% crude protein and are readily consumed by chickens, ducks, rabbits, and goats. University of Georgia Cooperative Extension has documented mulberry as a viable supplemental forage for small ruminants in the southeastern United States, and its use with poultry is well established in small farm research across multiple institutions. The fruit drops, and your poultry will clean it up. Free forage, free sugars, free enrichment for the flock. The trees do the work, your animals do the harvesting. The third anchor of the forage zone is comfrey. Comfrey, specifically the Bocking 14 hybrid Symphytum X uplandicum, is one of the most productive perennial plants you can establish on a small farm. Comfrey yields at between 4 and 8 tons of green matter per acre per year. It's high in protein, potassium, and calcium. Its deep taproot pulls minerals up from subsoil layers and concentrates them in the leaves, making it sometimes called a compost plant because every cutting makes the soil richer. Poultry generally won't eat comfrey fresh, but wilted, chopped, and mixed into forage, they accept it. More importantly, comfrey is one of the most valuable inputs you can run through your compost pile and worm beds, which brings us to Zone 5 when we get there. Zone 3 is the grain zone, and this is where we address the energy side of the feed equation. Protein keeps animals growing. Energy keeps them moving, producing eggs, gaining weight, and thriving through the work of daily life. And the most efficient way to produce energy feed on a small acre is through oilseeds and small grains. 3 crops carry this zone for most small producers: sunflowers, sorghum, and amaranth. Sunflowers are one of the most underestimated feed crops in small-scale production. A single acre of sunflowers can yield between 500 and 1,200 pounds of seed, depending on variety and conditions. Sunflower seeds are high in fat and energy. Confectionery sunflower seed contains approximately 20% protein and between 45 and 50% fat by weight. That makes it an exceptional energy supplement in a ration that is otherwise built around leafy greens and lean protein sources. And there's a practical advantage here that most producers miss. Whole sunflower heads can be harvested and hung directly in your poultry run. Your birds peck the seeds out over time. It's a slow-release supplement that also provides behavioral enrichment. No grinding, no processing, no preparation required. Sorghum, specifically grain sorghum, also called milo, is a drought-tolerant alternative to corn that is particularly well-suited to small acreage and marginal soils. Sorghum can replace corn in poultry rations at a roughly equivalent energy value when appropriately processed, making it a direct substitute for one of the most commonly purchased feed ingredients. Amaranth rounds out the grain zone. It is fast-growing and prolific. The seed heads can be enormous, and the entire plant is usable. The seed contains between 14 and 18% protein, according to university crop research. The greens are consumed readily by chickens, rabbits, and ducks, and it reseeds itself with minimal intervention, reducing replanting labor year over year. Here is what the grain zone is really doing inside the system. Your protein zone and forage zone produce feed that is nutritionally rich, but volumetrically limited. Your animals are getting excellent nutrition from duckweed, larvae, moringa, and comfrey, but they also need bulk. They need to feel full. They need caloric mass to fuel production. Grain provides that, and growing even a portion of it on your property, even enough to reduce purchased corn and pellets by 30 or 40%, changes the economics of your entire operation more than almost any other single decision you can make. You don't need to grow all of your grain on 1 acre. You need to grow enough to reduce what you buy. That is the goal. Zone 4 is the poultry integration zone, and this is the zone most small farmers think about first and understand last. Because this zone is not simply about keeping chickens, it's about using poultry as a managed tool, a living, moving, foraging system that processes your land while feeding themselves. The core principle of this zone is rotational integration. When you move poultry through a system rotationally, using chicken tractors, movable pen systems, or managed paddock rotation, they perform several functions simultaneously. They eat insects, weed seeds, and available plant material from the section they're in. They deposit manure directly onto the soil beneath them. They scratch and aerate the top layer of earth, and then they move, and the section they worked begins recovering and regenerating behind them. Rotationally managed flocks can forage between 20 and 30% of their nutritional needs directly from the land, depending on season, stocking density, and available forage. When you overlay the protein, forage, and grain zones on that rotation, that percentage increases substantially. Now hold this picture in your mind for a moment. Your moringa is being harvested and the leaves are dropped into the rotation zone. Your mulberry is dropping fruit into the same area. Your duckweed is being scooped from the pond and scattered directly on the foraging ground. Your animals are not waiting for you to bring feed from a bag. They are moving through a system that is already producing feed, continuously in multiple forms, and your job is simply to manage the flow between zones. That is the fundamental shift in thinking that makes this entire acre work as a system instead of a collection of disconnected parts. The poultry integration zone also connects directly downward into the compost and worm zone. Every manure deposit, every scratch through the earth, every consumed pest is a contribution to the biological engine that keeps the whole system fertile. Which brings us to Zone 5. Zone 5 is the compost and worm zone, and this is the engine room of the entire 1-acre system. Everything that is spent, harvested, consumed, or discarded in every other zone flows through here, and what comes out of the zone, in the form of finished compost and worm castings, is what makes every other zone increasingly productive over time. Your compost system takes in animal manure from your poultry integration zone, spent plant material from your forage zone, comfrey cuttings, moringa stems, mulberry prunings, vegetable scraps from your household, non-larvae food waste, crop residue from your grain zone. This material breaks down into finished compost that feeds your soil, which grows your forage plants, which feed your animals, which produce more manure, which feeds your compost. This is not a metaphor. This is biological engineering on a small scale. And it works because it mirrors exactly what healthy ecosystems do naturally. The worm zone. Red wigglers, Eisenia fetida, are one of the most valuable animals you can keep on a small farm. They convert organic material into worm castings with extraordinary efficiency. USDA research has documented worm castings as containing 5 to 11 times the plant-available nutrients of standard topsoil, including nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, in forms plants can absorb and use immediately. They also dramatically improve soil structure, increasing water retention, aeration, and microbial diversity in whatever growing medium they occupy. But here is what most people overlook. The worms themselves are feed. Worms can be harvested periodically and fed directly to your poultry. They contain approximately 60 to 70% crude protein on a dry matter basis, placing them among the highest protein live feeds available to any small flock producer. And they cost nothing to produce once your worm system is established, because they live on materials your farm is already generating as waste. Your compost feeds your soil feeds your forage plants and grain crops. Your worm castings accelerate both, and your worms periodically become protein for your flock. Zone 5 is not glamorous. It does not produce something your animals eat directly every day. But without it, every other zone gradually loses productivity. With it, every zone compounds in output over time. Zone 6 is the water production zone, and it may be the most overlooked zone on any small farm. Water is not simply a resource you manage. On a well-designed 1-acre property, water is a production system, one that hosts your aquatic feed crops, supports your waterfowl, cycles nutrients, and collects and stores what falls from the sky. A small on-farm pond, even as small as 200 square feet and 18 inches deep, is not simply a water source. It is your duckweed and azolla farm. It is habitat for beneficial insects that your poultry forage at the edges. It is a cooling and behavioral space for waterfowl that reduces stress and supports production. And if you choose to integrate small fish, tilapia, bluegill, or catfish, it becomes a direct protein source for both your animals and your family. Access to natural water bodies and forage can reduce supplemental feeding requirements measurably when managed with intention. Ducks that range near a pond stocked with duckweed and natural insects are doing a portion of their own feed procurement every single day. Beyond the pond itself, the water production zone includes your rainwater management strategy, capturing roof runoff, directing overflow to fodder plant rows and composting areas, designing land contours that move water toward productive zones rather than off the property. All of this extends the output of every other zone on your acre without a single additional cost. Water is the nervous system of this farm. Every zone depends on it, and the water production zone ensures that dependence is met as much as possible by what your land naturally receives rather than what you pump in. Let's pull back and look at the whole system. 6 zones, each producing something essential, each connected to at least 2 others. Your protein zone produces feed, and its biological waste fertilizes the water zone and feeds the compost zone. Your forage zone produces leaves, and its spent material feeds the compost zone, while its canopy shades and shelters the poultry integration zone. Your grain zone fills caloric gaps, and its crop residue flows to the compost zone or directly to foraging animals. Your poultry integration zone produces manure, which feeds the compost zone, the worm zone, and the BSFL bin inside the protein zone. Your compost and worm zone produces fertility, which feeds the forage zone, the grain zone, and the water zone. And your water zone sustains everything, supplying the protein zone, hydrating the forage and grain zones, and hosting your waterfowl. This is not a complicated system, but it is a connected one. And that connection, that web of production and return, is precisely what your purchase feed bills are currently replacing. Every bag of feed you buy is standing in for something this system could produce. Not all of it. I said 80%, and I mean it, not 100. There are things this system will not produce on its own. Complete mineral supplements, certain essential amino acid balances, vitamin formulations that require careful engineering to get right. A well-managed 1-acre system does not eliminate purchase feed. It reduces it substantially. But substantially matters. Substantially is the difference between farming that drains you year after year and farming that sustains you season after season. Where do you start? Not all at once. That is the first rule of building this system. Trying to construct 6 zones simultaneously produces 6 incomplete systems that underperform and overwhelm. Build in phases. Phase 1. Start with water and protein. If you have any water feature, a pond, a large stock tank, even a lined kiddie pool, begin your duckweed culture today. It is the easiest, fastest returning investment in this entire system. Pair it immediately with a basic BSFL bin running on kitchen waste. These 2 steps give you visible, measurable protein production within 30 to 60 days. Phase 2. Establish your forage zone. Plant moringa, mulberry, and comfrey. These are perennials. They take a season or 2 to reach a peak production. But once they're in the ground, they require minimal management and produce for years. The earlier you plant, the sooner the system matures. Don't wait until everything else is ready. Get these in the ground. Phase 3. Integrate compost, worms, and grain. Once your water, protein, and forage zones are functional, close the loop. Build or establish your compost system in worm beds. Plant your grain crops according to your local season and begin rotating your poultry through the system with intention. Not just allowing free ranging, but actively managing where they go, when, and for how long. 3 mistakes to avoid as you build. First, stocking animals before the system is ready. Your feed-producing zones need to be established and producing before you rely on them to replace purchased feed. Build first. Stock to capacity later. Second, underestimating the water zone. A small pond pays returns across every other zone in the system. If you have any ability to install or dig one, even a modest one, make it an early priority. Third, growing forage without a harvest schedule. Moringa and comfrey will grow whether or not you cut them, but irregular harvesting reduces their productivity and your animals' access to fresh material. Put harvesting on a weekly schedule from the first cutting. Consistency is what makes these plants perform. 1 acre, 6 zones, a system that feeds your animals, builds your soil, manages your water, and reduces what you spend. Season after season. This is what purposeful small farming looks like. Not perfect, not finished, not automated, but connected, intentional, and productive in a way that compounds over time. You don't need more land. You need a better map for the land you already have. If this video gave you a new way of seeing your property, share it with someone who's still buying all their feed. They need to see this. And if you want to go deeper on any single zone, the duckweed system, the moringa setup, the BSFL bin, we've covered every one of them individually on this channel. Links are in the description below. Until next time, keep the land working and keep farming with purpose.